in order to have a, collab crush, if you will, you have to really know who you are and who you're maybe meant to be with.
Welcome to Style as Identity, a podcast by the Majority Group. Join us as we get to know the designers and founders who are shifting our understanding of the style status quo. We're your hosts. I'm Lola Catero.
And I'm Franki Ikwuazom. Join us each episode as we learn from brands that are an extension of their values, identity, and aesthetic, and are super open about sharing the less talked about aspects of what they do. We're so glad you're here.
You know what it is.
It's time to reflect specifically on collaborations.
But also relationships.
With some of the 4 coolest brands we've talked to. Actually, everyone we talked to is cool. But we sat down with Dinner Service NY, KSENIASCHNAIDER, Zipeng Zhu, and Tala Barbotin Khalidy. And we're going to really just hear what it's like when they make something new with someone else.
And talk about what you and I reflected on the past 4 episodes.
Yeah, can't wait.
As Frankie says, let's shimmy. Frankie.
Oh my gosh, Lola. Last episode. Do
you believe in soulmates?
Depends on who's asking. Well, you're asking.
I'm asking.
Yeah, I do. I don't believe in like that one soulmate, but I believe in the soulmate concept and the fact that there is an element of introducing things, having someone that introduces things that you need that you didn't know you needed, or even that you need that you knew needed. I believe in that like partnership of soulmates versus like needing someone to complete you. But maybe you're such soulmates that like you push each other and you can like create things that you can even convince yourself maybe that are magical. I don't know. Are you crying?
Tears.
Honestly, I might be crying too. Maybe it's because I'm describing you.
This episode is about how you're my soulmate.
Yeah, that's what we're reflecting on.
Yeah.
Well, you asked me, so do you believe in soulmates?
Unsurprisingly, we are aligned. I do believe in soulmates. I believe some people have found like their one. I think that I can have a few soulmates.
Yeah. A soulmate roster.
I think part of it is opting
Rolodex.
is buying into it or like, agreeing into it.
Yeah.
Contractually speaking.
Yes,
yeah,
correct.
Yeah, this is about that. After talking to these 4 brands, we talked so much about like dream collab versus right collab. And it kind of got me thinking about how we talk about soulmates when we're young or in like Disney or like mainstream. And it's like always about the thing we want in the other person, like funny, creative, whatever. And I think initially brands think about their dream collab like that. Like, oh, I'd love to collaborate with this brand because they do this so well or whatever. But the real soulmate for brand collabs is not just who they are, but who we are when we're with them, when the brands are together. And yeah, it's just exactly like you said, like everyone brings to the table like their best selves and are celebrated and supported and made even better by each other. And I think that came to light across all the people we talked with over these 4 episodes.
Yeah. I mean, they all had their collab crush, if you will. And whether it was like something that was more like a long time in the making or something that was more like instant, like Dinner Service, they're at this concert and they're like, I gotta go out and ask, versus something like
we've all been at that concert looking at somebody,
versus like, Zipeng, KSENIASCHNAIDER, where they're like, Anton was like, I've been a fan of Adidas Originals for a while. Zipeng's like, Allbirds, that's the brand I want to work with. But yeah, this collab crush, if you will. I like the idea of it's not just what this person or this brand, since I know we're taking this analogy as like a little bit like,
stick with us, everybody.
Yeah, it's like your soulmate, but also your brand soulmate. Yeah, I like what you said around it's who you are when you're with them and vice versa, because there is this element of a collab. I think KSENIASCHNAIDER talked about this, where they're like, Adidas like pushed us. They told us, they're like, we really want to see what you're working with here. you're going to get inspired in ways that like maybe you couldn't literally introduce into your process because you're quite structured or I guess practiced in the way that you approach things. And so there's this person where like they're going to give you the freedom to like grow in what you already do so well naturally, but they're maybe going to inspire you to do things in ways that you're like, oh, okay, I can do that. And like I can do that in a way that like mixes with what you're working with, and like we're making something new. So who you are with them is actually very real, and like transfers well from like the soulmate analogy to this like collab analogy.
Yeah, people opt in or like invite someone to do a collab because it's like they're like I like you as you are, and I want to create something with you.
Yeah,
I think that's something quite beautiful.
Collab chemistry.
Collab chemistry, collab crush.
Collab crush.
Let's talk about the collab types we talked to. They're versions of different versions of collaboration. Dinner service was exclusively collaborated with people, artists, creatives, musicians, etc.
So it was like brand to people.
Brand to people.
Brands coming to the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They wouldn't exist without a collab. They don't produce something unless they have a collab.
Yeah.
And then we have KSENIASCHNAIDER, a smaller brand, still established with,
super established.
But then compared to Adidas,
Been around for a minute.
a legacy brand. And so you have established brand and a legacy brand. Then
Yeah, Zipeng, you have like people to brand, so kind of the opposite of dinner service, where you have like a designer working with maybe a more mainstream brand.
And then Tala Barbotin Khalidy and Siron, that's brand to brand. And they're of similar, stages of the brand, and they just acknowledged each other and said, hey, like, let's create something together. And they still maintain what each of them did. So, right, Siron created jewelry. Tala made the bag that the jewelry goes in, but they still collaborated on the jewelry design. And that's also like a different output than we saw. The other brands would create one entity, and this was like taking both disciplines together and creating something new as a result. So yeah, different ways of looking at what collab means. Frankie, last time we did a reflections, you asked me what stood out to me. I was so rude to not return the question to you.
You were not rude.
I
just asked myself.
And you asked yourself, and I should have asked that because I always want to know what you're thinking.
Same.
But I'll ask now.
Yeah. What stood out to me?
What stood out to you?
So much. But something that the different conversations got me thinking about is this idea of the awareness that some of these brands, all of these brands, had to have. And then also now thinking about ourselves, if we were ever to have our own brand and do a collaboration with another entity, whether it's like brand, person, you really have to know who your brand is before you try to collaborate with someone else. And so, all the different brands kind of did the work, like dinner service, thinking through all the work that they had to do with, different people that they brought in just to discover who they were. And that is something that happens just as a result of forming a brand. But you could really see that in order to have a, collab crush, if you will, you have to really know who you are and who you're maybe meant to be with. I think we often see these collaborations and we're like, oh, wow, like that really makes sense. Like I could see how that worked out. Or you see somewhere you look and you're like, I don't understand how those two sought each other out, but that's really cool. They clearly got something out of it. But there is this idea of just like really having a strong idea of like your identity. And it makes sense because when you think about all the conversations that happened when they're trying to create something new outside of what they've already created, like it's probably a lot of like figuring out how do I flex my creativity in this new structure? Because it's like you're working with someone else. And even if they don't necessarily, you wouldn't describe them as having structure, like that is structure because it's different from yours. So it makes sense that you have to come as like with a strong idea of who you are, because then when you're making decisions, you're making them out of the confidence of like, I know what I'm bringing to this and I know what's needed of my, creations to make this happen.
Kind of reminds me of, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else? Who said it?
Who said it?
RuPaul said it.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Erica. Erica, producer for the win. But we are talking about relationships. And yeah, if you don't know yourself, how can you confidently enter a relationship with somebody else and expect yourself to extend the love to them and that relationship? And you also mentioned, yeah, like maybe you look at a collab and you don't quite get it. Sometimes we look at a collab and we get it, but it's totally lacking chemistry and it's not creating something new. Like, oh, we get it. You wanted to make money, so you put your two logos together. And sure, like that's a vibe. But what is it bringing out for each brand? And like, what's the new thing you're saying to the world? At the end of the day, like, we like style. We want to talk about that nuanced fashion. Sometimes it is just for the aesthetic. If it's fire, it's fire. But what's the reason to spend all this time in a collab? I think we should be interrogating that more. Like, all these brands were values based and did create something net new. I mean, Zipeng pushed Allbirds to create like a new kind of bolder version of some of the colors. So it's still rooted in their values to make it as sustainably as possible, but to say like, hey, how much can we push these colors? And that is a beautiful collaboration when, yeah, you're respecting each other, but then also inviting them to explore beyond what they currently know.
Yeah. And honestly, as you're saying this, I'm like, part of knowing who you are is also knowing how you want to grow. And so I think that's a big part of collaborations, right? And then another aspect of it is knowing what your non-negotiables are and like very tied into values, right? Of just like knowing I can approach someone who maybe most people would look at this and say this doesn't make sense as a collab, but there's someone I know I can grow by partnering with and vice versa. And then also someone I know is going to respect my values, my non-negotiables.
Yeah. What I loved about Zipeng's story is that he was so enamored with Allbirds and, you know, he courted them, but he still didn't lower his non-negotiables. He was like, oh, you want to do this collaboration? Like, let's not do it during Pride. And they're like, okay, sure. And so even if you're really excited, or he was very excited, he didn't lower himself or change who he was and how he wanted to show up in the world and how he wanted his work to show up and impact the world just because he was enamored by them.
Yeah. You know, that's a real thing. I think sometimes when we go into collabs, partnerships, there's always this feeling of how do you avoid falling into lanes in a collaboration? Because I think that naturally happens too. You're the one who's bringing the, you know, the beats, and I'm the one who's bringing why would anyone bring the beats? You're the one. You're bringing the beats. I'm bringing the funk. Help. You're the one who's like maybe bringing the more like, you know, like you're bringing like the color and the creativity, and we're bringing the like investment and blah blah blah. And I like what you just said about Zipeng, because it's like oftentimes when we go into that, we kind of think like Gabby and Trina talked about this too, in terms of like when they first started, they were like, okay, we don't want to step on toes. We want this to work out. But I think part of also collaborating is kind of you're starting to sense like, how do I not limit my influence in this situation? Like when Zipeng was like, maybe we shouldn't do this in this month. We should extend this. It's like that technically, like, yeah, that should be also his call, you know? But like when you come in as a designer, it's easy to tell yourself, okay, I'm coming in as the designer, right? So like that's not really,
or the smaller brand.
Or the smaller brand, or like the brand that should let this artist really like blossom. So it's like that's not really my lane. But I think when you're collaborating, like everything at some point is a little bit your lane.
Yeah.
And understanding how to navigate extending your influence, especially if it's maybe a collaborator that doesn't necessarily see you as someone who can give input on those things quite yet, but like saying like that I have something to say about this, like I'm going to shape it, because at the end of the day we're making this in a shared way.
Yeah. One note on that is like, yeah, Dinner Service NY, they did talk about a collab that fell through, and I think they continued to pursue it and things felt a little off, and then eventually it was called that like this isn't coming to life. And so I mean, there's an opportunity, a sunk cost there with time and resources, but like it's okay to call it, because, you know, as we talked about, like failures bring you to your successes. And you had some very poetic words about that.
That was me on that day.
That was you on that. I have thought about it many times. But then kind of building off of that, respecting yourself, we talked a little bit about with Zipeng and KSENIASCHNAIDER, and like what does it look like when people or brands want to capitalize off your identity or the things that are core to your brand, and how do you kind of ensure that respect? And it made me think a little bit about like reasons to do a collab or not to do a collab that Zipeng was talking about, and just like, what is everyone bringing to the table? And it made me think of the difference between appreciation and appropriation. Dapper Dan says money, and duh, of course. But hearing Zipeng talk a little, for me, also got to the point of, oh, someone might be paying me so much money to do this Pride collection, but if they want to do it in a week, then they're also not respecting my time. And that's also a form of exploitation. And I think that's a great flag, because if a brand is coming to you asking to do a collab and they're like disrupting your calm with their chaos, that's a huge flag. And if you kind of set that boundary for yourself and they push back, then that's probably not going to end well. And conversely, if you're a brand and you're like, oh, we're a hot mess, but we have good intentions, it's like,
no, clean up your house.
Clean up your house. Clean up your house. There's more than just money at stake. That was a great rubric that Zipeng shared, and really had me thinking about, what does that look like to truly value a partner?
Yeah, that is so real. Anywhere you are, and whether it's like you've already done them and you're like, I want to approach my next one differently. They haven't felt like, they always feel a bit more like they take more out of me than they should. It's like things to look out for early on.
Yeah.
As you're saying this, we talked a little bit about, you know, the tricky part of, as you're assessing a potential collaboration, especially someone who's drawn to you because of what you uniquely offer, which oftentimes overlaps with our identities, right? Like, how do you suss out when it's someone who you want to allow in? You're like, I want this brand to also be able to express their brand through our, whether it's our shared identities or my own identities, to reach and resonate with an audience, whether it's like a new audience or existing. Or if you're like, this brand might honestly be capitalizing off my identity and like maybe isn't doing the work they need to do yet for this to be a space that they play in. And so I think there's a little bit of that too, of just like that's also one of those things where early signs, but you also might be midway through and you're like, this isn't working. Just like, you know, what's the right time to be able to call it? I think it's the minute you realize, to your own comfort, of course, that it's something that just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're like, what's in it for me? What's in it for them? What's in it for our customers? And what we should actually be having is a customer first mindset, and say, how can we better serve them together and give them something new? And what I loved about Dinner Service NY is like, collaborations for them are actually just a growth engine.
Yeah, like a growth and marketing engine.
It comes in different forms and they create something net new, and it's still these nuanced, like, rich stories that whoever they collaborate with, but it's all in service to like actually fund their like sustainability initiatives, to want to put more, you know, clothes out there that have no plastics, no toxins, but it's behind this like a story that stands up on its own.
Mm-hmm. And it's growth for them, but also for the people they're collaborating with too.
Yeah.
Because they talked about how, specifically with the artists, the musicians, like this concept of merch is quite two-dimensional. Oftentimes it's like you put a couple dates, you put the concert iconography or illustrations on a t-shirt, slap it on, great, we got it. Which a lot of times, I mean, we saw how much those Renaissance long sleeve crew necks were going for. Like, it works. At the same time, what I think is really cool is that it wasn't one-sided. Like, it is truly a growth and marketing engine for Dinner Service, but also you can see how these artists are like growing the way in which they engage their fans, or the people, or their communities rather, is probably a better way to refer to that, through that collaboration.
Absolutely. And all of these brands showcase this, but it's like really clear that this is not easy. It's hard work. You're just like all of a sudden agreeing to spend probably about 1.5 years in production. When we asked people how long these cycles take, and there's like so much riding on that. There are a lot of work, and a lot of times we like aggrandize the struggle, and we're like, the hustle is hard, but like, you know, get rich or die trying. And it's like, no, like everyone's going to work hard, of course, but like we don't want to burn out. And also, it's not about the struggle. Like, not everything has to be a struggle. Like, we can learn along the way and we can work really hard, but these endeavors that are like, we're all going to be double downing and learning a lot. I think we saw examples here how there's no tears, right? There doesn't have to be tears.
Yeah. And going back to your soulmate analogy, like sometimes it can be easy. It doesn't have to be like, it's love, it's hard. That's how life is. Sometimes it can be smooth.
Yeah.
But of course, everything's complex.
Ugh, isn't it? Speaking of complex, there's a lot of brands doing collabs right now in popular culture.
Pop culture.
Pop culture. And
I'll
I'm thinking
never
like
say that again.
pop culture. What have we learned? So 2 examples that come top of mind for me.
Just a collaboration whiz.
Just a collaboration with, okay, for the most popularist of cultures. So for a globally recognized entity, Skims, it's been like 3.5 minutes and they dropped the NBA and WNBA collaboration, the Swarovski crystals, like all of this stuff. And it hasn't diluted the brand. The press around this are hitting different outlets. Like the WNBA and NBA outlets are covering this. People that are interested in basketball or hypebeastwear, whatever you want to call it. The Swarovski crystal things, those are different magazines. And it's...
Oh, so they're even getting like, you know, you might be getting like hard print or whatever you would call it. Like you're like, it's not just the outlets where it's like, oh, people are reading this online. It's getting clicks and impressions. They're also like getting magazine. Interesting.
There's so much going on with Skims. And I think that there's a lot to learn with how that brand comes to life. And sure, they have infinite money and they've doubled down, but just paying attention to what the collab is, who's that intended audience, and what the result is, and then kind of really looking across all those initiatives, including like the nipple bra came out like basically a minute before the other drop, and the brand is not diluted as a result.
Yeah. And on the flip too, I'm like, what did those conversations look like? Just wondering, WNBA and NBA, or even Swarovski's crystals, like I would love to be a fly on the wall for some of those brand collaborations, or even like initial conversations and courting of just what was the vision from those brands' perspectives coming into this.
Right. And where did it stem from? I mean, were the underwear of the NBA and WNBA even something up for collabs, or did Skims say, how do we get in on that? Mm-hmm. What's not being sold, or what's a good collaboration there that would be good for us? I think flipping it on its head. So that was a little, we could say inspiring. I think that's a good case study to see what we would maybe want to take with us. And then one that is one of my favorite brands, Brooklyn Circus.
Love the Brooklyn Circus, or just Brooklyn Circus. No, I don't
Brooklyn,
know.
Yeah.
It's just Brooklyn Circus.
Love Brooklyn Circus.
Don't need an article or qualifier.
Sure don't. I mean, they are no stranger to collabs. Done mainstream collabs with brands like The Gap, and then smaller collabs. They recently did one with a eyewear company called Randolph. If you're not yes. Did you see it?
I did.
I went to the opening.
Oh, you are always at the spots.
It appears like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Or do the spots come to you? We don't know.
But that one was such an interesting mix of what makes a really right collab. So if you're unfamiliar with Randolph Eyewear, they've been around for years. They sell to the public, but they also make eyewear for the military and have for years. And Brooklyn Circus and Randolph came together and said, let's make a capsule collection. And what does that look like? And what are we bringing that's net new to the world? They made eyewear that honors the history of the Haitian pilots that served in the U.S. military, World War II. As part of the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yeah, the Tuskegee Airmen.
And every element and detail in those glasses and the 200 steps and over 1.5 years that it took to bring that collaboration to life was rooted in the history and legacy that these men created for the U.S. and their lives that they dedicated. And these eyewear pieces represent that. And who better than a brand, Randolph, that make this eyewear, and then for Brooklyn Circus to create that together? Who better to tell that story? I mean, that's where it's like chicken and the egg. Like, what happened first? Did the idea and then the people came together? Did the people come together and say that? Like, that to me is a perfect collaboration, because you don't really know where the idea began or what happened next. It's just so. And a couple things about that. Well, maybe 3.
I'll keep it at 3. 1, I saw it and was immediately like, yes to this. Not only because I'm more familiar with Brooklyn Circus prior to this, but like just the natural way in which they came together to also give the mic to something that a lot of people may not know about. The mic, speaking of appreciation, but also thinking about history as their collaborator. I think oftentimes like we don't think about our inspiration as a collaborator, and it's not the same as like, okay, what's our rev share? Like what are we going to put in front of our audience? What are we going to sell? What's going to be the output? But like you can tell there was a third aspect or factor in the room when they were collaborating, because it was so core to what the output was, and that was the historic elements that they were really inspired by, which is cool. You look like you're thinking.
I'm loving you. I am thinking, but this look is just loving you.
Oh my gosh. Love Soulmates. You're all probably sick of this by now, but we're not. Too bad. And then the third thing too is like, we didn't end up actually including this, but we were talking to dinner service and just like, like just like morning flirting with each other when we got to their store. And something that Gabby said stood out when, they were doing their research on us, we do research on them, was just like the fact that so much of the majority group, which like kudos to you, is about speaking with brands who are preserving culture. And as you're talking about this collaboration between Brooklyn Circus and Randolph, it really does demonstrate like how much of culture cannot happen or like cannot be created by one person alone. Like culture is truly created by people responding to other people and building on that. And that is such an important part of collabs, especially collabs like this that continue to shape existing culture, create new pockets that like push us forward and create other spaces in which we can exist in and communicate through. But like that really is that like responsiveness that happens when people that does create culture and push it forward, which like is a collab. Like you're responding to each other. It's a conversation.
It's a cosign on the culture.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, everybody check that stuff out. It's cool.
Check that.
I can't believe you were there at the spot.
Frankie, this was so lovely to learn with you.
Same. Do we get like a little certificate? Well, you all do. Season 2, we made it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, truly like such a good, speaking of collaborations, like this is one big one.
This is a whole big,
us, but also like everyone that we collab with.
Yeah. And all you listeners, without you, you're our cosign.
Yeah, you're our cosign.
Yeah.
And specific cosigners like Erica Kramer and Stephanie Gomez.
Yeah. And Franki Ikwuazom.
And Lola Catero. Yeah. Honestly, like, I love learning with you. This has been so fun.
I love learning.
And I just respect the shit out of the people we speak to. Like, every single conversation, I'm always just like, oh, wow. Like, truly, those are the only ways I can describe it. But I'm sure you'll come up with more eloquent responses than that.
Probably not.
Yeah. So, yeah.
It's true. So much appreciation.
Our
DMs have been steadily increasing over the seasons. Keep it coming. We're getting ready for season 3. I mean, like not tomorrow, but like 2024. And we want to hear from you. So please, if there's a topic that you want to hear about, or you're just like super excited to share your thoughts, then do it at the majority group.
Yeah. We're listening.
Love you.
Bye.
Damn, I love these brands.
Same. I mean, I love that they're just into getting on a podcast and having a very real conversation about what's enabled their brand to survive.
I love it. Okay, let's keep learning together. And all you out there, if it's in your journey to make a purchase today, check out some of the brands we've been talking to.
And if it's in your journey to show us some love, hit that subscribe button.
See you next time.
Bye.